Okay, today we are going to do a green screen fantasy portrait. We're going to take a photograph of ourselves and we're going to convert it into what's called a little people image. You're going to insert yourself onto a base image. So the first thing we want to do is open our base image. So I have here my base image, which I should have saved in my green screen folder. And I'm going to duplicate my background layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this image. Okay, so I have some scratches on the table that I'm going to clean up. There's like a little pin that is holding my pencil up, a little push pin, long pen was stuck into the end of the eraser, and I want to retouch that. So using my cloning stamping tool, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to do Alt, and I'm going to remove that. So if I zoom in a little closer, and we navigate over here, we can see that that is now gone because I've taken out that pin. So now it looks like my pencil is just standing all by itself. I'm going to come down to the edges here, and I notice a couple areas where I've got some scratches, and just going to clean that up. Come over here, I've got some scratches on the table that I want to get rid of. Just cleaning up my image just a little bit. You know how I just keep taking from right around the table where... Okay. Great. I'm going to come up here. Oh, there's a nice big scratch right here that I want to get rid of. Also, I'm going to add in some depth of field. I want my my focus to just be in the center. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to blur out my image a bit to make it so that just the center section is going to be sharp and everything else. So let's just back up really quick. I'm going to go Control minus and back up, Control plus, and I'm going to move my history, close my history box here. So let's go turn off my background copy so we can see. So there's before. I've got some scratches here, some scratches there, a little white thing that's sticking out there, the pin that was holding. So we can see how I have cleaned up this image. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to blur this background copy. I'm just going to blur it out. And I'm going to go over here to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to add a nice blur to this image. Okay. And now I'm going to add a layer mask to this. Go in with my brush tool and make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to sharpen this area right in here where I'm going to be putting myself. So I'm just going to kind of sharpen. You'll notice that my opacity is down to about 50% so that I can kind of take this out a little bit slowly here. Okay. I also want to make my pencil completely sharp, so I'm going to just take the blur off my pencil here because I want my entire pencil to be sharp here. I'm just going to zoom in really close to make sure that the table in the background is still really out of focus. I want that table in the background to be really out of focus, but I want my pencil to be sharp. So I'm going to take the blur off my pencil here and make sure that table in the background is nice and blurred out. So I've got blurred table and some fruit dried fruit, and I've got dried, this part here in the center is looking sharp, and I've got the pen in the front is blurred out, and the table and part of the design is blurred out. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and I might blend this blurring here a little more, so I'm going to make a bigger brush, and I'm just going to put some of that back in, and then take some of it out again. I want this to just kind of gradually get sharper, but then blur as it moves down the paper a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to go Control minus, and okay, so there's my image here. I've went in and I made some corrections to this image. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my body image, which I have right here. I went in and it's in my green screen folder. I opened that up. Okay, so I need to select my body pose, but the best way to do this is we're going to learn how to use a new tool. We're going to come up here to select color range. Okay, and I'm going to put my fuzziness to 100% here, and I'm just going to start to click in here with my dropper. And what I want to create is the most contrast. My background should go white and my body should be black. I want to create the greatest contrast. Okay, so once I do that, I'm going to say OK. So now I need to go refine the edges and refine the selection. So I'm going to come over here to my quick selection tool. I'm going to go to refine edge, and I'm going to shift the edges down a bit. Okay, and I'm going to add contrast and feather slightly, smooth slightly, but not too much. And then I am going to say OK. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock this layer I'm going to unlock the layer by double clicking on it. So it's going to become layer 0. Now I'm going to delete the background, leaving only the body. I'm going to zoom in, Control plus, and I don't want there to be any green along the edge of my body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect. Actually, I want to undo that. Okay. I am going to go in with this quick selection tool, and I'm going to add to my Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on delete. Okay, so you're going to notice that you still have some green that you need to remove. So go to the deselect, okay, so that you can then now go in with an eraser tool. We're going to use the eraser tool, and I'm going to at first I'm just going to quickly just kind of erase all the green that I see here. Okay, that's easy to erase. That's away from my body. It's not going to impact my body in any way. So just taking that out, taking this out. I'm staying away from my body right now. Okay, I'm just getting rid of this extra green here that I don't need. I'm staying far away from my body because I don't want to accidentally erase my body. Okay, so carefully kind of going around, making sure I didn't accidentally miss any green here, because it's easy to do that. I'm going to check everything, make sure I don't miss any green, zoom in real close. Move all around my navigator, making sure I've gotten rid of all my green. Okay, so I'm going to get closer now. So I'm going to zoom in, Control Plus. And I'm going to get much closer now, being really careful that I don't accidentally erase my hand. So I'm just going to get in real close here, get the green off. You can use either a real soft or a real sharp brush, whatever works better. I find that if I use too much of a soft brush that I start erasing parts of my body, and I don't want that. I only want to erase the green that is on the outside. And you can see how I'm very carefully erasing that green here. Now you're going to be much smaller in the image, so if you don't get every little bit of green, that's going to be okay, because we're going to be resizing ourselves and making ourselves much smaller. So you can see here, I am being very careful along the edge though, because I really want to make sure that I don't accidentally erase my hand. Okay. Okay, and I'm coming up here. I'm getting in here. Okay, good. Okay, make this a little smaller. And get in closer on the close. Okay. So I'm showing you every little bit of these steps because it's really important that you don't accidentally skip any of these steps, okay? So getting all that green is really important. I'm going to go around the edge of my body now and just double check. I've got a little bit here on my hair, but you know what? I'm going to end up having to change the color a little bit, so that's okay. You can see a little bit of green is reflecting on my hair. There's really nothing I can do about that right at this moment, but I will do it later when I go to put it in, because I am going to have to color balance my image. Okay, I'm going to have to make sure that my image matches the color of my base image. So I'm going to zoom out, and here we go. We've got our body here now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, there's a couple ways to do it. I'm just going to do a select all, and then I'm going to go to edit copy, select all, edit, copy, and I'm going to come to my base image here that I've worked on. I'm going to go edit, paste, and I'm going to go ahead and paste myself in. Okay. So now it's time to match the color of the body to your base image. Okay. So my body right now looks very red in comparison to my image. So I'm going to come up here to image adjustments, and I have a couple of things I can do. I can do brightness and contrast, I can do hue, saturation, I can also do photo filter. So I'm going to start with photo filter first, because I can do a warming filter here and I can make my body look much warmer. Do you see that? You see how I'm bringing it up? The idea is I want to match the base image to my skin. So I'm just going to bring this up and add a little bit of a warmth to my skin. I'm going to say OK. Now I want to also adjust hue, saturation. I actually want to desaturate myself a little bit. I want to bring the color down a little bit, because there's not a lot of color in my base image. My base image actually is a little bit warm, just warm in color, but I want to make sure that my body color really matches my base. So definitely having it more on the warmer side definitely works. Having it a little more desaturated and even maybe a little darker works. So I like the way that looks now, so I'm going to say okay. Now it's time to resize my body. I'm going to hold down the shift key so that it is in proper proportion. I'm going to come over and select my move tool and click on show transform controls. I'm going to hold down my shift key and I'm going to resize my body so that it's much smaller. And I'm going to start to line it up. So I've got this body right here, these pants, and I want my waist to kind of fit right in here, okay? So if I move it over here, I can see that it's still a little too big. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so you guys can see what I'm doing just a little better. So my idea is I want to have my waist kind of fit in this space here. So I'm going to also kind of turn this a little bit. I want to line up my hands with the pencil. Okay, so my hands are lining up with the pencil. My body's still too big, so I'm going to hold down the shift key and make it even a little smaller. Again, I want to line up my hands with the pencil, and we can see here that they're lining up. And my body is still looking really big for this pencil design, so I'm going to make it even smaller, making sure my hands are still lining up with the pencil. And I am going to have to distort this a little bit. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and you can see that I've got Scale, Rotate, Skew, Distort, Perspective, Warp. I'm going to be using probably a little bit of perspective. So I'm actually going to stretch this out just a little bit like this, and maybe stretch out my body a little bit, kind of bring in, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to click on check. Now I'm going to come over here to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to come over here to Warp. Okay, I'm actually going to bring this in a little bit. I'm going to bring my edge of my shirt to the edge of this pant here, and then I'm going to bring this in a little bit. You can see here that I'm starting to kind of make my waist a little bit smaller. I want my head to be just a little bit smaller, not so drawn out. Okay, I'm going to say check mark here. I'm going to just... So now I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. I got my hands in place with the pencil. So that... Oops, go back. Let's go back. Okay, so now I'm looking to see if my shirt is kind of fitting here with the pants. I feel like it could go just a little bit smaller, so I'm going to do the shift down just a little bit more and bring that down. Now I feel like these pants are starting to fit a little better in here, and my hands fit over the pencil just fine. And might come back here to Edit, Transform. I'm going to try distort this time a little bit and see what happens. If I distort it, I can make it just a little bit thinner here, bring it down. Making the waist just a little bit thinner. And maybe angle it just a little bit. If I click on this, I can angle it just a little bit. That makes the hand fit over the pencil a little better. Okay, so now if I back out, I think I'm starting to look a little bit more in perspective. Okay. So now I'm going to go on to the next step. I'm going to add a layer mask just to blend in my hands on the pencil and also to blend in this bottom piece here. So I'm going to click on a brush, make sure I've got my black over my white, and I'm going to put my opacity down about 50%. Click on my layer mask. I'm going to make a smaller brush here, and I'm just going to start to kind of blend out my jacket a little bit here on... Oops, I did too much of my hand, so let's put that hand back in again. Took too much of my hand out. Put that back in. Want my hand to be there. 100% my hand. But I do want to kind of blend the bottom of my shirt a little bit into the bottom of this drawing. Okay, let's see. Starting to blend it just a little bit to the bottom of this drawing. Okay, good. Now comes the tricky part. You want to make sure you use kind of a nice, soft, small brush. I need to take off this pencil area here, okay? I need to make it look like the pencil is coming over my body. So I have to very carefully come in here, zoom in really close, move that navigator over, zoom in really close, and reveal this pencil here. I want the pencil to go over my hair here. Make sure, if I go over it, I may have to go back in and undo some stuff. I may accidentally take too much stuff out. That's okay. Just gonna carefully go over this. I might up my opacity just a tad, just especially here in the middle. Might want to work with like 100% opacity just here in the middle. But then when I get to the edges, I'm going to be really careful that I don't take too much off. Okay. And I might even need to use a crisp brush. I may have to kind of go back and forth between using a soft brush and a crisp brush. So I'm going to go in with a crisp brush right now. And I'm going to be really careful, really tiny little brush. And I'm going to put this back in here. I took some of the shirt off. I want the shirt to butt up right to the pencil edge here. And I'm using a crisp brush because a crisp brush won't be too soft along the edges. And I want there to be a nice crisp edge of pencil here. So you can see how I'm kind of carefully going down this and blending it in. And if I overdo it, I can always undo it. So just kind of going very carefully along this edge here. Very carefully. Yeah. Very carefully. Okay, and then I'm going to come over here. So I have to keep kind of going back and forth because I'm like, okay, so where does my pencil end and where does my shirt end? I have to make sure I line those up just right. Okay, so there's my shirt. I still got a shirt here. I got to make sure I got that shirt here. Pencil edge, shirt edge, lining it up really carefully. And I got to keep it straight because these darn pencils are so straight, you know, so I got to make sure that that is nice and straight. By zooming in and using like a nice careful brush, I can now zoom out, go Control minus, and look at this, and it's starting. It looks good now. I'm able to blend that in, and my edge of my shirt is looking pretty good here. It's blending into the drawing. My hands look natural. Okay, so now the next step is I need to create a realistic shadow. Okay, so to do that, I'm on step number 16 in my directions. To do that, I'm going to duplicate my figure layer. Okay, this is my third layer should be my figure layer. I'm going to duplicate my figure layer. I'm going to call it shadow. And on my shadow layer, I'm going to go back in and paint back in everything I just did. Meaning that I want to have my body. Okay, I want my total complete body. I don't want to have that piece missing from where the pencil blends in. So, and now I'm going to delete that layer mask. Okay, I'm just going to delete the layer mask. So if I turn off my shadow layer, I can see the figure layer below. If I turn back on my shadow layer, I've got a complete solid body. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click on my edit foreground, my foreground color over here. I'm going to make sure it's black, okay? And then I am going to click on this little box right over here, this little blocks, little square box, and I'm going to lock the shadow layer. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to lock the shadow area. I'm going to go up to Edit Fill and make sure foreground color is selected and say OK. So now I have a solid black figure. And what I'm going to do is I need to move this to kind of look like it's a shadow laying down here on the paper, kind of lined up with this pencil that we see here. So I'm going to click on my move tool. I'm going to zoom in really close, make sure my show transform controls is selected. I'm going to start to move this shadow. I'm going to rotate it, and I want to line up this hand with the pencil here. Okay, so I'm going to line up that, but at the same time I want to make it look like it's like kind of behind me. So I'm going to kind of rotate this even more. So I want to make this hand look like this hand is coming over the pencil. And I'm going to stretch out the shadow a little bit. So I'm going to come here to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to use perspective to kind of stretch this shadow out a little bit. Stretch it out a bit. Maybe make it a little bit narrow. Click OK. I'm going to rotate the shadow a little more. Making sure that this hand is going over the pencil. And I'm going to go to Edit, Transform. I'm going to skew it a little bit here, possibly, maybe skew it down and then move it up a little bit, making sure that the hand is over the pencil. Okay, like about there. Let's move that up a little bit, about there. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to maybe adjust the scale down a little bit, just make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and maybe warp it a little bit, kind of warp it, stretch it out a little bit. Might be good. Keeping the hand over the pencil, stretching it out a little bit, making it a little thinner. Okay. Check mark. And now I'm probably going to work on it a little more, but first, now I'm going to change the order here. I'm going to actually move my figure layer above my shadow so that my shadow goes behind my figure. And I'm going to move my shadow a little bit more. Like right about there. Put a little bit of space between my arm and the shadow. Alright, so now I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to add a layer mask to my shadow, and I'm going to remove some of the shadow. Like, I don't want this shadow off my figure for a second. I'm going to turn back on my figure. I don't want that shadow on the pencil, so I'm going to take that off there. Let's see, I don't want any shadow on this side of the body. I'm going to go back in and add some shadow again right in here. We definitely want the shadow in there, but not on the pencil, so we're going to take that off of the pencil. But definitely some shadow in here. I'm going to take the shadow off of here. And I'm going to put some shadow back here behind. Actually, I think I'm going to make this shadow a little bit thinner. Just going to make it a little bit thinner. And then I'm going, so you can see how I'm constantly having to like adjust the shadow a little bit. Make sure there's some shadow here. Okay, not so much there. Some shadow here. But not so much in the clothes here. Shadow back in here. Okay, so I think I have my shadow now, but I want to then take it to the next step. So the next step is I need to match the color of the shadow to the colors of the other shadows. So if we look at this, we can see that that this shadow is just way too black. We need it to be more of a brownish shadow color. So I'm going to come up here to image. I'm going to zoom in closer so you guys can see what I'm doing just a little better. I'm going to come up here to image adjustments, and I'm going to go over here to hue saturation, and I'm actually going to change the shadow to more of a brownish color. I'm going to lighten the shadow just a little bit so that I can make it more of a brownish color. Desaturate it just a little bit. My idea is that I'm trying to match it to the brown of the shadow that I see here, this brownish color here. If I go left, it kind of becomes more of a reddish tone. If I go a little bit to the right, starting to be a little more green. It's green is too much. So it's kind of a red tone is what I need, kind of a reddish brown. And if I do to the right, it's too red, so I want to desaturate those colors. I really want to match it to that brown that I see here. Do I make it a little bit lighter? Nope. I need to make it a little bit darker. Okay, so that's starting to look pretty good, so I'm going to say okay. So now I'm going to unlock the shadow layer. Okay, I want to unlock the shadow layer. And I want to soften the blur to match any blur that is already naturally in the photo. So you can see here that this shadow is a lot sharper here at the end, and as it moves up it becomes much more blurred and a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Gaussian blur on this shadow. I'm going to come up here to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to add a bit of a blur to the shadow, matching. I want to match the bottom blur right here where it's sharper. So I'm going to make it slightly blurred out, but not as blurred as up here. Okay, not as much as the top, just more matching the bottom here. I'm going to say okay. You will notice that the shadow becomes more blurred as it moves away from the subject. Also, the shadow becomes slightly lighter as it moves away from the subject. Thus, we will try to mimic this with our shadows. So now I'm going to duplicate the shadow layer. I'm going to duplicate the shadow layer. I'm not going to worry about naming it, okay? I'm going to say, okay. I am going to turn off the original shadow layer. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to turn off the original shadow layer by clicking on that little eye icon. Now I'm going to I'm going to click on my shadow copy. And now I'm going to go to Filter Blur, Gaussian Blur. Now I'm going to blur the shadow more. I'm going to blur it to match more of the top here, more of the shadow that we see up here. Okay. And it's going to be much more blurred. It's going to match more the top of the shadow up here. So we can see that these are now matching much better. I'm going to say OK. So now I need to match the top of the shadow with the sharper shadow that's down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my layer mask here, and I'm going to use a brush tool, about a 50% opacity, and I'm going to remove, let's use a nice soft brush, okay? I'm going to remove this bottom blur. Okay, I'm going to remove all of this bottom blur here. But I'm going to have it be a little more gradual, okay? So I'm going to put some of this back in again. Just going to gently put it back in. Okay, just a little bit of this. You can see I'm kind of going back and forth, just kind of, so it gradually kind of blurs down, okay? So now I'm going to turn off this layer, and I'm going to turn back on this original shadow. I'm going to click on my shadow layer here, and I'm going to remove the top part here. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to have this kind of gently blend down, so we gradually blend it. So now I'm going to turn them back on again. And now you're going to notice that the shadows go a little bit sharper at the bottom, and as you move towards the head, it gets more blurred out. Okay? So if we turn off the layers, we can see what they look like, right? One end is removed, and the other end, okay, we have like opposites. And if you look at the paper on step number 26, you can see the example of that. Okay, so now we need to lighten the end up here a little bit. This end up here is a little bit too dark. We want to lighten this end just a little bit. So we're going to merge our shadows together. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select both my shadow layers. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say Merge Layers. Okay, so now I'm going to add a layer mask to that. I'm going to click on my layer mask. I'm going to come up here and click on my gradient tool, and I'll make sure I select linear gradient, and I'm going to set my opacity to about around 10%. Okay, and now I'm going to drag it along the top here, and you'll notice that this top shadow is just becoming a little bit lighter. It's just kind of gradually blending down. Okay, so if we zoom out, we can see here that we've got a little bit of a lighter shadow at the top here that kind of gets darker as you move towards the base of the body. Okay, so when you're done, you should have a nice shadow that's finished. It looks natural, that blends in. And if you want, you might want to add at the very, very, very top layer, you may want to add a solid color. I'm going to add in kind of a brownish color to match my image, and I'm going to go in with a nice big 2400 size brush, clicking on here, and I'm going to take out the center section here. I'm just going to have a nice brown vignette along the edges here of my image, and if we see our layer mask, we should have a nice dark oval in the center here with nice brown along the edges. And if we turn off that layer, we can see how that looks. right, so that's the full steps here. Make sure you follow all these steps.